Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Cranked and Ranked, the podcast where Eddie, who is not frozen,
I'm not frozen,
and I rank band discographies, and as you've seen recently with a couple episodes, some different stuff. A lot of music talk, sometimes random tangents that make no sense whatsoever, but it seems like a lot of our listeners / viewers love that. But today we're back with another band discography. And this is very exciting for me in a lot of ways. But before we get there, introductions. Old head, as usual, your host, and with me as always, Mr. Eddie Sparxx.
That's me. I am on this show, yes.
That's true. You are one half of the combination that makes up this whatever it is. It's always funny whenever we take a week off. It's only 1 week, but I still feel like God, I haven't done this in forever, but it's really just been 2 weeks. Anyway, so this is a very interesting episode, and I'm very excited about this because we're going to be ranking the discography of the band Fugazi, which is exciting for me, number one, because they're one of my favorite bands ever. And it's also very exciting for me because this is the first episode I think we've ever done where Eddie was completely fresh with this band. Like, had you now that you've listened to them all, had you heard anything prior to this that you remember?
I maybe heard Merchandise.
Oh, okay.
Aside from that,
I'm surprised it wasn't Waiting Room, but okay.
Yeah, Waiting Room as well. Also felt quite familiar, but like, I'm gonna say this as a disclaimer now to any alt rockers and punks that are way more experienced in this. I came into this as more on the metal end of the heavy rock spectrum. So
yeah,
this is a zone that I enjoy, but I know far less about.
And to be fair, as a show, we've never done a band like this. We've done metal and glam and punk and hip hop
and grunge.
But this, which would fall more on like the post-hardcore side of things, we've never done a band like this. And so as a show, it's a little bit on the fringe too, because we're dudes. Both of our favorite bands is Metallica, which I'm pretty sure most people who are really into Fugazi are not also into Metallica, which is why I'm very weird, because I love both of these bands. But yeah, so this is going to be fascinating because we've not only have we never done this, you and I have never spoken about music like this or about Fugazi. We didn't have any. Sometimes before episodes, we do a little bit of messaging back and forth about stuff, but there was nothing this time. So I have no idea what you're going to say about stuff or where this is going to go. And so this is just the most fascinating episode for me. And you don't really need to give too much of a disclaimer because I have a weird feeling this is going to be one of those ones that gets like 300 views on YouTube. Because it seems like certain bands that I'm all like, oh, I'm so excited to talk about this. And then people out there just like, whatever. So, but I am very excited. But if there are Fugazi fans who are joining this, hi. And, I guess you could probably also say Fugazi falls into that camp of the bands where some people who are really into Fugazi are also complete jerk-offs. Because they do attract, that kind of crowd, the sort of uppity music fans. And when I say uppity, I mean like the kind of people that can't wait to get you to their
hipster types.
They can't wait to get you to their apartment because they have some original Tom Waits albums, and not to mention a small jazz collection. And so it's, which is not me. And so, you know, that's like,
you just pissed off half the people watching this, and we haven't even started.
I don't mean to bag on Tom. See, that's another thing. Like artists that I bag on sometimes, like Tom Waits is a big one, Leonard Cohen. These are all people that as musicians in their bodies of work, I look at it and go, it's pretty impressive. But the people that listen to them most of the time, I'm like, get the fuck away from me. You are obnoxious. And some people like that listen to Fugazi. Some people would say that I'm obnoxious, but you know, in a very different way. But yeah, so normally we do this thing where we're like, well, where were you introduced to Fugazi? Yours would be right fucking now.
Yeah.
Mine's an interesting one because it's a little bit later than all the other stories that I tell, because this one was in high school, so in the mid 90s. And I had a friend who was into Fugazi, and I heard random songs, and it didn't connect with me. I was into Minor Threat, so when it came to like Ian MacKaye, I was like, oh, I like Minor Threat. Fugazi, I'm not quite there yet. A couple years later, I guess this would have been in 96 or something like that. My time would finally come. I was working at Best Buy in the music department, and we had a really big back room area with boxes of CDs that had to go out, and just random other shit, merchandise and end cap stuff. You work at a grocery store, so you know what an end cap is, I'm sure. And then, you know, standees, all that stuff. It was just a big room of crap. And occasionally, you know, at certain times of the day, people would wheel in this entire cart of like shit that had been returned. And we dealt with CDs, VHS at that point, and some computer software. This is back when like there was like, you know, TurboTax had just come out, and everyone's like, "Oh my god!" Anyway, so we're there one day, and they wheel back this group of returns, and one of the returns is the Fugazi album "In on the Kill Taker." I believe it was a cassette of it. And it was opened, and we had a little jam box back there. And I was just like, all right, maybe I'm going to throw this in again. And it starts playing. I'm back there by myself, gathering whatever I'm needing to gather for that part of the day. And that starts to play. And the first song, Facet Squared, comes on and literally changed my life at that moment. I'll get into that a little bit more when I talk about that album, but that song and that album and that moment was really big for me. And that was my introduction to Fugazi. And ever since then, you know, 96, 97, I have been a huge fan of everything that they put out. And so that's why it's so interesting for you, newbie, not only 20 years younger than me, but also, you know, a newbie to this stuff. And so did you read up on them at all? Did you know Ian MacKaye was in Minor Threat and then started Fugazi?
Yeah, I did a little bit of a deep, you know, I did a little bit of research, nothing like crazy deep.
Yeah.
But, you know, Ian MacKaye, Guy Picciotto.
It's Guy Picciotto.
Guy Picciotto. Yeah. Cool names.
And Joe Lally on bass, and
Joe Lally on bass.
Brendan Canty on drums.
They've had their lineup's been pretty consistent from the start, hasn't it? It was right the way through.
Just those four dudes. The only difference was that the last album and the last tour, they added an additional drummer on some stuff.
Right. Cool.
But that's been it. So, I'll interject things along the way, just because they're a band that like I know a lot about, because I've just been obsessed with them for years.
This is like a inverted alternate universe version of the Toto episodes we did, because you went in completely dark and I knew everything. And it's good. Yeah. It's fun when this happens, because it's
it is.
You know, it's, you know, almost like I'm taking a master class, and you know, you're the guy I gave $50.
That has been, you know, it's so funny. That's always been a dream of mine, to be able to become a teacher where I just teach bands to people.
Yeah.
Today we're going to do this. Unfortunately, my daughter hasn't gotten to that point yet. Like, she likes a lot of music, but she hasn't gotten to the point where she's really receptive to me just rambling on about stuff.
Yeah.
But if it ever happens, I'm going to be like, oh, let's talk today. Let me get out a blackboard. Let's talk about Fugazi, which we're going to do. So we're ranking. If you're watching the video, if you look behind me, I've got all the albums, and then the first Fugazi EP. I don't have Margin Walker, but the first EP and Margin Walker were put together and are on the release that's called 13 Songs, which that's an album length, and it's very important to their discography. So our ranking is including the 6 actual full-length albums and 13 songs. So we have 7 albums to rank. And I apologize in advance for this. Probably will be one of those episodes where you'll say the name of a song and I will bust into some part of it, probably. That's going to happen at least a few times. But I'm excited to get into this. So let's just go ahead and do it. And as usual, I throw it over to Eddie Sparxx. This is I'm so excited about this. To start us off with his number 7 Fugazi album.
Cool. So my number 7 Fugazi album is End Hits from 1998.
All right.
Okay. Jumping right in, a break. It's kind of a, punky intro song with some, Nine Inch Nails-esque piano and clean guitar bits in there.
Yeah.
Place Position is this real driving rocker. Recap Madoti is this groovy bass viber. A lot of really cool bass lines in Fugazi.
Joe Lally is one of my favorite bass players. He is he has those bass lines that you can get stuck in your head, just the bass line part of a song.
Yeah. And it really struck me with, how, obviously there is that big hardcore punk element to their sound.
Yeah.
But it really struck me that, the rhythm section is so melodic, that's a really interesting thing.
It's because when they started, I think Ian's vision was to bring the punky vibe and mix it with kind of reggae or something like that, where there's a real groove based element underneath it all. Yeah. And so that's what led to their sound.
You get No Surprise, like that guitar melody in the latter half of the song borders on psychedelic. Really cool stuff.
Yeah.
And see, this is my bottom pick, and it's still really cool. But I feel like of all their releases, this is the most disjointed of all of the tracks on here. They feel a little bit like they're all like kind of pieces that maybe aren't as cohesive as certain other albums they have.
Yeah.
But Five Corporations, the tambourine was a nice touch.
This one's ours, let's take another. This one's ours, let's take another. I love that part of the song. So great.
Hell yeah. Caustic Acrostic, one of their shorter, faster pounding songs. There's always a couple of those on a Fugazi album. Closed Captioned has an almost reggae feel to it.
Yeah.
That's a very, like you say, groove based. Floating Boy is this psyched out vibey jam. Foreman's Dog is this mid-tempo spooky punker. Arpeggiator, it's an instrumental that does what it says on the tin. There's a lot of really cool arpeggiated stuff going on in it.
Well, the thing I love about that song is it's literally just taking a guitar in standard tuning, totally removing this hand from it, and just strumming the string. It's literally, the whole thing is just a standard tuning up and down the strings. And every time, the first time I heard that, I was like, is that really, did they really write a whole song where they don't have to use this hand? It's just the right hand.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Like stuff like that. They're a very creative band.
Oh, yeah.
That struck me right out of the get-go. Guildford Fall, sneaky yet loud at points. They have this cool way of really using dynamics in the songs. Pink Frosty, really weird and experimental song. Gives me kind of Disco Volante era bungle vibes.
Yeah.
And then F/D. There's a load of like fake out endings on this one, and I guess they kept going till they got what they wanted. But like, I know that this is a band that likely wanted to troll the listener a little bit. So You know, there is that element of, oh, are we done? Oh, no, there's another one. Is that it? Oh, there's 30 seconds left. Ah, they got 3 more. Nice. But yeah, like this album to me, it feels the most disjointed of the bunch. It gets points for, you know, weirdness and being way out there,
Mhm.
but I feel like this was executed a little bit more cohesively on Red Medicine, which is the album that came before it.
Yeah.
So,
You're not wrong on any of those things. That's also my number 7 in hits
okay.
from 1998. Probably the most difficult of their albums to get into, for me.
Hmm.
There wasn't so this would have been their fifth album, but sixth if you count 13 songs. But it is their most experimental, and it's they expand their sound the most on this album.
Yeah,
Um, but it is one of those things where there weren't that many on my initial listen. I remember there not being that many moments where, oh, that's cool. It was kind of like, maybe I'm not ready for this one yet, and that's essentially what it was. Because you
that's how
gave
it
it,
came off to me.
I gave
Yeah.
it a few years, and the strengths started to reveal themselves. And there's a documentary that they put out called Instrument, and you see
Hmm.
some footage of them recording some of the songs on this album on there, and that actually sort of makes me appreciate the album more, because you listen to it and you kind of get the idea that these guys are just having a really great time in the studio. So
Yeah.
it is a lot of experimenting and not so much worrying about, tying things up nicely in songs and making sure the album has a flow that makes some sort of sense. It's just kind of, it seems like it's an album that kind of became what it was, just a bunch, four dudes in the studio, and then this is what happened. It does lack some of the energy of the previous albums.
Hmm.
And so that's another reason why it's last for me, because it does have a lot of strengths. I mean, there's no, I've come to the conclusion that Fugazi is one of those bands that, for me, there is no album that I would call non-essential. I feel like
Hmm.
if you get into Fugazi, every single album is important to the story of that band and where they went. And In Hits is no exception. I just think that it is their experimental, and just kind of not giving a fuck, and just letting the chips fall where they may, as they say. But yeah, it's their least enjoyable album for me, if that's a thing. It's
Yeah.
my last go to Fugazi album, although there are a handful of songs that I absolutely love. um and overall it's a great album. But yeah, they did so many better albums than this, that it's hard to put anything last.
Hmm.
Honestly, like, there are a few places in my ranking that it was really tough for me to, like, oh, this has got to go here. Wow. And so I had to throw up my hands and just say, all right, well, this is the ranking is what it is. But yeah, End Hits is it's a great album. But yeah, it's a little bit more of a challenging listen than the rest of their stuff. Although I think some people would probably argue that all of their stuff is a challenging listen, but that's, just depends on your taste, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving on to the number 6 Fugazi album.
Cool. So my number 6 Fugazi album is Red Medicine from 1995.
Okay.
Uh, this one takes the experimentation to its extremes. You
Mm-hmm.
know, perhaps not as wildly as End Hits, but
Mm-hmm.
it definitely is a big step from, being, layering guitars creatively to really going out into really arty stuff.
Yeah.
There's some instrumentals on here that I think, wow, can I buy some pot from you?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's in all seriousness though, like this one for me, I feel like is going to be a bit of a grower, because generally speaking, I find that that's usually the case with albums from 1995.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm going to jump into the tracks.
Okay.
So you get Do You Like Me, The intro sounds like somewhat. The intro sounds like Trent Reznor and Les Claypool made a song together. Like, but then it goes into like more of a Fugazi type vibe.
Yeah.
But Bev for the Scraping, real fun guitar lines in that song.
That
Latest,
fucking 1-2 of "Do You Like Me" into "Bed for the Scraping" is just that's fucking great.
mm. Latest Disgrace is also pretty damn rocking.
Mhm.
Birthday Pony, they're getting
Yeah,
real arty with us on this album. Like
yeah.
Forensic Scene.
My
Oh, sorry.
my this is like a secondhand story, but it's just like gives an insight into like their live shows. My friend that was really into Fugazi went to go see them on the Red Medicine tour. I didn't go because I wasn't into them at that point, but he came back and was like raving about how amazing they were. And he was like, there was this one part because the way the Birthday Pony plays out, it's got like the verse and I guess you could call it a chorus, but it's just him going, "Laugh, boy," over it. But then it gets to a point where it bottoms out and it's just some feedback. But apparently there was like a fight in the crowd, and it's a big no to get chaotic at a Fugazi show. I don't know if you know that about them, but if a pit breaks out where it looks like people are just doing that shit where they're turning around and pushing each other and shit, Ian stops the fucking show and he says, "People didn't pay to come and watch you guys fuck around with each other." And so people will usually just cut the shit because Ian says don't do it and you don't do it. It's okay to like bounce around and like that jostling around kind of crowd energy, but once it gets like just violent and stupid, which I've always loved about them, because that's one thing that's kept me from going to so many shows over the years, is I just hate dealing with idiots that just want to mosh. I've never understood the mentality of paying to see a show, but the majority of the time you're staring at other dudes and probably not even listening to the actual music. Whereas I want to watch what they're playing. Sure, I don't mind moving, and I don't want everyone just to stand there looking at their phones or with their arms crossed or whatever. But I just think that the idea of the mosh pit has become ridiculously stupid over the years, especially at hardcore shows. So anyway, stuff like that will happen, and Ian will stop the show. And if somebody's causing like a huge problem, the rumor, I mean, I don't know if it's a rumor, if it was actually true, is that they would kick people out of the show, and as they would leave, they would hand them an envelope with the money they paid to get into the show. They had envelopes of money ready to go. So when they kicked somebody out, they just said, "Here's your money back." And they kicked them out of the show. Anyway, because that was their whole thing. They never charged. I saw them in 2001, and I think I paid $7.50 to see them.
Yeah, they never charged much, did they?
Never over $10. They never made any merch. The number one way to determine if that somebody isn't actually a Fugazi fan, if you ever see anybody wearing the "This is not a Fugazi" shirt, immediately you can walk up to them and say, "You clearly are not a fan of Fugazi," because that is not their shirt. I get that it's funny, but it's like us big Fugazi fans, we're not buying that shirt. And we're just like, no, they didn't make any merch. They were against making merch. They were against charging high prices for their shit. And I respect them for that. Anyway, back to my friend's story. The fight breaks out. Ian stops the song right at that part in Birthday Pony. And then he's just like, "Everybody cool the shit. Stop this shit." And then he just kind of looks into the crowd and he's like, "This is a birthday pony." And then the song like comes back in at that part. And I just hearing the story of my friend telling them, I'm like, that had to have been fucking rad. The song building up for that little end part. And I'm just like, that's just fucking great. Anyway, I feel like I derailed us to cover all these things about Fugazi.
Nah, the listeners love that shit. Let's keep that vibe going, man.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Birthday Pony is a great song.
Yeah, man. Forensic Scene has a laid back vibe going on. See, that's the thing, that they are. I wouldn't necessarily say they write heavy songs. They write, kind of gnarly, hard rocking songs, but they don't really go into like Helmet territory, for example.
Not
Like,
no. It's
yeah,
aggressive, but it's not necessarily metallic in any way.
yeah, it's it's much more on the punk ethos of
Yeah.
being loud and aggressive than the metal one. But
Yeah.
it really, I was really pleasantly surprised with their ability to have like laid back songs, you know?
Hmm.
And some of those moments are some of my favorites, really.
Yeah.
Combination Lock has a real fun feel to it. Fell Destroyed is a cool, moody one. By You. There's a lot of stuff going on here on this album that appears in the likes of mid 90s Pearl Jam. And this is where I kind of like began to feel some like familiarities with other bands. And I started, you know, even on something like 13 Songs, for example,
Hmm.
if they had come out of Seattle, that would be a grunge classic, you know, because there's a
Hmm.
lot of stuff on there that reminds me of, you know, some of the earlier, punkier Soundgarden stuff, a little bit of Mudhoney,
Yeah.
some Green River maybe. But, you know, I was really pleasantly surprised um, that I found so much to latch onto, you know. I was like, oh, so that band were probably listening to this era of, you know, Fugazi.
Yeah.
Um, Version, is that clarinet in this song? Like
Yeah.
that's been like heavily affected. I was gonna say I
It's
did
either
hear
that or
about it.
or a saxophone or something. I don't remember exactly what it is, but yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Target has some cool riffs in it. Back to Base is short and sweet. Down City, some furious punkage going on. Long Distance Runner is a really cool laid back closer.
Hmm.
Again, like I say, like this takes the experimentation to extremes
Hmm.
more so than ever before. Like this is their fifth album. I just feel like um In on the Kill Taker, that's the yeah, In on the
One
Kill
prior.
Taker.
Yeah.
Wanted to make sure I got the album title right. Um yeah, I feel like they kind of peaked with their creativity and layering things there. I feel like this one is like, okay, we've proven we can do that.
Yeah.
Let's really blow things way over the, you know, over the top of what we thought we could do before.
Yeah.
And I respect that, and it could climb my list going on as a result. But as of right now, it strikes me as the sort of album that I'll rank low now, but it'll climb maybe at least one spot down the line, you know?
Yeah. No, with it definitely benefits from repeat listens because it's got a lot
Mm.
of really cool moments and songs. Not my number six. Um,
Okay.
for some of the OGs, this may be controversial. I don't know. My number six is 13 Songs from
Ah.
1989. So this is the first two EPs, Fugazi and Margin Walker. Um, so this gets a lot of credit because it's like an absolute classic and it's very influential. Like out of, you know, and it's the one that I think most people know songs from. Um,
Mm.
in fact, it's gotten to that point with Fugazi, especially where you know how there's that really awful trend of somebody wears a shirt and then you say name three songs to them because you're a jerk off.
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit, if somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, I like Fugazi," and I'll be like, "Cool, name me a song that isn't Waiting Room," and, because then I know. Like if you can go any further than that, then I'm like, "Cool." But you know what? Now we're on the subject of that. We ever really talked about the name three songs phenomenon that's been going on
I
in
think
this world? And this, I guess I don't know if it's over on your side of the world too, but it's in the U.S. for sure.
yeah, that there have been, you know, there have been several times where I've hung out with, you know, uh, one of my girlfriend's friends, and you know, I've seen a girl who has like, you know, no knowledge of Pink Floyd wearing a Pink Floyd shirt,
Yeah,
and you know, I know deep down, I'm like, I know that you bought that from Primark, and I know you don't even know the name of the band on that shirt. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna put myself in the position of being that guy.
yeah,
I mean, I'm already thinking like that guy. But as far as I'm concerned, the band is essentially getting a free promotion from, you know, an unwitting billboard, so to speak.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like there's all these people walking around, and obviously there are like certain bands that it's much more common to see them on a shirt, like um, you know, Guns N' Roses, for example, is a very common
yeah,
shirt for people to wear, and most people who wear it know "Sweet Child of Mine" and maybe "Paradise City," But it's because you get like these certain bands always appear in like, I mean, like say for example, we have Asda over here, which is essentially, I think they are basically the UK's equivalent to Walmart.
okay.
Like, I think they're partnered. I don't know if they still are, but I know at one point they were. But I always, I don't want it to sound like kind of insulting to these big bands, but I kind of refer to them as like, Walmart merch bands, where
Yeah,
it's like, of course Queen have shirts at X superstore,
yeah.
but it's
Well, I mean, at this point, if you're talking about stores like Walmart, Walmart has now over here been doing like exclusive vinyl versions of bands that I love, and so I can't argue with that. If you want to get
yeah,
into business practices and stuff like that, that's a totally different story. And both of us are not knowledgeable enough to really
yeah,
talk about that kind of thing. um,
yeah.
but yeah, there are those bands that that their shit's probably in a Walmart. So
Mm. And where I was heading with this is like, there is this thing of, you really do take a massive risk of coming off like a complete dick. In actual fact, it is guaranteed you're gonna look like an asshole regardless, because say going back to girlfriend's friend,
mhm.
that's only gonna put her in a shit mood. It's only gonna make her friends think I'm, look at this elitist fuck. No
Yeah,
wonder,
yeah.
no wonder this guy doesn't, have any friends, right? Yeah, obviously that's not entirely true for me, because I
Mhm.
don't behave like an asshole. But well, I'd like to think I don't. But when it boils down to it, what if you do say to, said person wearing a shirt, and they fucking school your ass with some knowledge of, oh, well, I actually prefer the demo version of that song. It's on a B-side to this album, and then you're gonna look like a fucking moron.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
I'm with you. I honestly over the the past year or so, and it's been many years that it's been happening, but it's gotten to the point now where there are like legit TikTokers that's all they do
hmm,
is walk up to people wearing shirts and ask them if they know the songs. And I've thought about it a lot because it annoys me because
hmm,
because I've done it plenty of times. I remember like years ago, I was at work and there was a girl at work wearing a Slayer shirt, and I was like, "Oh, nice shirt," and she's like, "Oh, it's my dad's shirt," and I was going, "Oh, okay." I was disappointed
yeah,
because like I was like, "Oh, let's talk Slayer," but I was like, "Oh, all right, well then never mind." So there
I had
was a
a
disappointment there, but I
yeah.
just walked away from it. I'm not going to be like, "What the fuck you wearing it then?" I would never do that.
Yeah. It's one of those situations where you're like, oh, okay, have a nice day, right? Because like I remember I was at a house party once, and I saw a guy in a vintage white uh white snake shirt from, Donington 1990, and I thought it was the coolest fucking shirt I'd ever seen. I almost pulled a slash and traded my fucking car for this shirt, because I was
Yeah.
just there like, that thing's badass, dude. I went over to him and I started talking to him, and he was like you said, it's just one of my dad's shirts. I thought it looked cool. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna show you a White Snake song right now that's fucking killer. I showed him Judgment Day, and he was like, this is actually really good. and I hope that he at least came away from that interaction, with a new band to check out
Yeah, yeah.
rather than be put down and put off associating with those fans.
Yes, yes.
The only thing you are going to do if you know, verbally assault someone for wearing a band shirt that they don't know, you're only going to put them off more. Would you rather recruit another fan or be an asshole and ruin any chances of that person enjoying good music?
I think what we've learned recently is that people don't want to recruit more fans.
Yeah, like
um,
there's a big thing as well of like, gatekeeping has really come
gatekeeping.
into with the Stranger Things thing.
Well,
Eh,
the thing that I've learned about that is that the people that do the gatekeeping type stuff, they're usually people that don't actually know much about the bands anyway. They just have decided that this is the band that they're going to choose to like defend somehow. But
mm,
the weird thing that I've run into is that I find myself on the side of like, well, it's stupid to do that kind of shit, but there's a thing that's been going on, and I don't know how long it's been going on, but it's definitely happening now, where I can understand fans being upset and annoyed. And that's not some random person who's
mhm.
just happens to be wearing a Pink Floyd shirt or a Metallica shirt or whatever. There's this thing happening now where metal, especially punk rock is in this too, has been co-opted into cosplay. And so
Hmm.
the girl that's wearing the Metallica stuff with the vest and wristbands and all that shit, and you're just like,
The
oh, she must
Eddie
be into
Munson.
metal. Yeah,
Yeah.
yesterday she was fucking Pokemon. So it's like,
Yeah.
so that annoys me because I'm like,
Hmm.
it's one thing if you just thought a shirt was cool and you're wearing it, but if literally you're taking this music that I love and you're just taking it as, oh, I'm just playing this character today.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, then you can go fuck yourself. But just wearing a shirt, if you don't know it and you just thought it was a cool shirt, or Sweet Child of Mine's a great song, so I saw there was a Guns N' Roses shirt for only $5, so I bought it. Great, why not? I'm
Yeah.
totally fine with that. But yeah, the side of the things where it's just today I'm metal, tomorrow I will be somebody from some anime. That to me, I'm just like, nah. That's when I kind of get a little bit annoyed, and I know that that's wrong because to each their own. Who the fuck
Yeah.
cares? But still, I'm
I,
being honest with everybody.
I tell you what, the closest thing I have ever felt to cultural appropriation, and hear me out, hear me out. The closest thing I've ever felt to, the likes of cultural appropriation, and I want to handle this, carefully, because, I'm saying this in kind of a tongue-in-cheek way,
Uh-huh.
right? Um, and that was when I I went to some sort of I think it was the come to think of it, I think it was like my high school prom, right? And all of the fucking people who, rallied around me and said, oh, look at this, you know, I don't want to the bad F word for gay. I
Yep.
don't want to say it in case this show gets yellowed.
I
That's
got
just the
called that a
nature of the
lot for
beast.
having long hair throughout my life.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Say for example, you cum guzzling F word, for liking hair metal and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Who the exact same people and their girlfriends know all the words to Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi. And when it came on, where were they? Round the fucking speakers singing along to that song,
Yeah.
right? And I thought to myself, in that moment, I just had a little moment where I glared at them and I thought, how fucking dare you,
Yeah.
call me all these names for liking this era and knowing Living on a Prayer that inside out. And I just felt a little bit, again, I'm a white man, specifically from Britain,
Yep.
right? Right? You know, who
It's
is
like
a
the only thing, the only thing wider than
yeah,
me is if I was from England.
yeah. I am the whitest of the white. We are a and I don't mean that in a bad way, you know, but it's that thing of we conquered so much of the globe for the sole purpose of spices. Do we season our meat? No. I I do. I
Oh
do.
fuck, I do too.
Yeah. But it's one of those things culturally where it's like I think to myself, we really like pillaged that much of the world, and the only thing we really have to our name is a tikka masala. You know, oh, it's just funny. I find
Yeah.
that very funny.
Well,
Yeah.
that was a nice detour, right? Talking about, well, I guess it makes sense because we were talking about a lot of bands that are nothing like Fugazi, but I guess Fugazi is a band that people can be, the people that are into it could be really passionate about
Yeah.
the music, because it's very meaningful music, and so when somebody's
Mm.
just taking it as um, a fashion statement, it gets really annoying. But anyway, back to 13 songs. Um, this is my number 6 because just based on the fact that I feel the band topped this many, many times over. It's a very important album because it's the beginning of everything. It's very enjoyable. Um,
Hmm.
there's a part of me that I wish that I wish if I could like time travel and kind of just go, and maybe not even time travel, just I want to go and be a fly on a wall, um, in the late 80s in the DC music scene, because all the things that were going on, not just in the punk and hardcore world, there's a lot of music, a lot of great music that was happening in DC. And just you see some footage of early Minor Threat shows and or later Minor Threat shows and early Fugazi shows, and you just the energy is insane. And I'm just like, and there was just this big scene and everyone was so excited about this music. And so I could imagine being one of those people. 13 song, well, when the Fugazi EP comes out, and it just fucking blowing your mind, because it's at this point I've heard it enough times where I'm like, oh, this is what this sounds like, but it's really
Hmm.
pretty groundbreaking when you think about it. um
Yeah.
and the thing that I like a lot about the the first EP part, because it's two EPs that make up 13 songs, the Fugazi EP, the first one, I just love how it sounds like a band that's stumbled upon something really unique and exciting, and they're kind of just letting it burst out of them. It sounds like
It's
I
very
don't think
organic.
I
Yeah.
don't think they had any idea of where they could go as a band right off the gate or out of the
Hmm.
gate. But I feel like there was an excitement of like, holy shit, like this is awesome. And
Yeah.
that's how I feel. Now it goes here at number 6 also because I think Margin Walker is probably my least favorite Fugazi release, Margin Walker, which is the last 4 or 5 tracks on 13
Hmm.
songs. Um, but the actual Fugazi EP, you have fucking songs like "Give Me the Cure," which I absolutely love, and "Suggestion." Suggestion is so good. Not to mention the "Waiting Room" is a fucking classic, and "Bad Mouth." Bad Mouth may have been the first Fugazi song I ever heard, because I think my friend played me that in like '94 or something, and I was just like, all right, this is all right. It didn't really do anything for me. But at the same time, the importance and the potency of this collection of songs, I could see this being somebody's favorite Fugazi album, and I would not fault them for it at all. But I just really think that overall, I just know where they go from here, and it's just so much better. So 13 songs ends up being my number 6.
Cool. So let's get to number 5.
Yeah.
Cool. So, ja,
Yeah, it's
das ist
nice.
gut. So yeah, my number 5 is their last release from 2001, The Argument.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some of the band's most mellow material is on this one, but
Yeah.
it also showcases growth and maturity, as well as their ability to write in a variety of styles within their own. So,
Yeah.
this album gets my respect for that. Intro is, it's a spooky static interference intro.
Yeah.
But then you get Cash Out. That bass and drum groove throughout is super tasty.
Yeah.
Full Disclosure is just gnarly, punky alt rock. Epic Problem is an up tempo, shouty punker. Life and Limb has a really cool laid back vibe. Love that song.
Yeah.
The Kill, considering the song title, a surprisingly chill, mellow track.
Yeah.
Strange Light, love the vibe here. Oh is a punky alt rocker. Ex Spectator is a really dynamic song. Yeah. You're loving it over there. You're really this up.
All these songs, there's so many fucking great songs.
Night Shot, man. It is an uneasy track that has a lot of left turns. And then finally, closing out the Argument, you have Argument, which is, it's kind of dreamy track that also has a lot of, parts in it that really explode.
And it's a pretty heavy subject matter. I mean, because you have to remember, this album came out, I believe, the month after 9/11 here.
Yeah.
And I remember when it came out, going to the store and buying it and just thinking in my head that we need a Fugazi album right now. So thank God that they put it out. But the Argument is literally like lyrically speaking, it's about everyone being so hung up on minute arguments about bullshit when we should be paying attention to the fact that people are dying. We're causing people to die over in America, and I think it's got their most. This is also my number 5. The Argument,
nice.
The Argument's also my number 5. I'll just jump in because I always like, because I agree. Like it's their most, to me, it's their most mature album. Arguably their most well crafted. Also, even though like I like other ones better, this one overall as an album, it feels like a really, like, these dudes know exactly what they're doing, and they just fucking put together this perfect, thing. Anyway, but I love the Argument as a final song, especially because they, after this album came out, they went on tour and then they announced that they were on indefinite hiatus and they've never done anything since. So, and at this point, I don't think that they will, because there's been, I think a couple of the band members have mentioned that they've been offered like millions to get back together for like Coachella or Lollapalooza or whatever. And they've all just moved on with their lives. And some of them, as far as I know, they all play music, but I think between wanting to play music and wanting to have time for their families, not everybody's lives work out anymore. You get older and you don't have fucking time to do that shit, and it just doesn't work out. Or if you're like, well, I've got a week here, let's pencil it in, so we have to make sure we do something this week, and that doesn't mean that good shit's going to come out of you that week. So that's just a lot of fucking pressure. So I get why they're not doing anything, but I always loved the Argument because of a specific lyric that Ian sings, because Ian, very well known for starting the band Minor Threat, which in turn started the straight edge movement, because there's a Minor Threat song called Straight Edge, and then eventually people caught on and it became a thing. You put X's on your hands. That means that you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't have promiscuous sex. I think later on it became, I don't eat meat. All these things kind of came into like straight edge. And so people always look at him as like that guy, like that saying about these things, like don't drink and don't smoke. But there's a line in the Argument that says, I think the line is, the whole lyric is, it's all about strikes now. So here's what's striking me: how some punk could argue some moral ABCs when people are catching what bombers release. And I just thought it's the ultimate full circle Ian MacKaye moment, where he just goes, yeah, I was a fucking kid. There's more important shit. And so I just love that they leave on that note of just like, he's like, he's grown. Everybody, if you're worth a damn, you grow a lot. and you start to realize that things that you thought were important back in the day, maybe not so much, or maybe you
Yeah.
understand how they're not that important to everybody, and that's okay. Um, I'm reading a lot into that lyric, but I've always just really liked it. Anyway, Argument, their last album from 2001, it came out the same day also as the Furniture EP, which was another Fugazi release. It had like three or four, I think 3 songs on it. So when you went to the record store, you had to buy both because it was just fucking Fugazi. But this album came out, and I think for the entire rest of the year, it was the only album that I listened to in 2001 because I was just so because I would listen to it and then another song would all of a sudden reveal itself and go, oh, this is fucking great. And so it was like every listen, I got something new out of it. And they had a second drummer on a few tracks. And then I saw them on the tour for this album, and they had the second drummer the whole show, which added an interesting dynamic. But unfortunately, around that time, it seemed to be almost a fad for bands to have 2 drummers, because there were so many bands that I would see and be like, oh, here's another fucking 2 drummer band. Like, that's just way too much shit. But Fugazi pulled it off, and Fugazi were just a fucking amazing live show. And I'm just glad I got to see them because it was a blast. And I remember that the venue that I saw them in, there was the stage, and then there was the standing room, and then off to the side they had these little bleachers, and we got there early enough to where we just went to the top of the bleachers and literally just stood above everybody watching Fugazi. And I'm just like, this is the way to do it. I don't gotta deal with these fucks down there. I get a clear view of Fugazi. Nobody's bothering me. It was a great show.
Nice.
But yeah, I love this album. I feel like it's interesting because I like the fact that this album has those songs that took a little bit for me to get into, right? But then they have those ones like Epic Problem and and X Spectator that are just fucking bangers, absolute bangers, and totally love them. And I just love the fact that this album is so good, and you go back and listen to it, and it still feels so strong because that's where they left off. They literally put out arguably the most well-crafted and mature album that they'd ever done, and then they called it quits. Well, I'm not putting it because there's that thing of like putting Fugazi on a pedestal, like, oh, they're never going to get back together. Flash forward to when they actually do, and I'll be like, eating my, what do they call that? Eating crow or whatever. I don't know what the word is.
Yeah, something like that.
Anyway, the argument is fantastic, from a band that just put out a shitload of fantastic albums, which is why there's 4 albums in front of the argument. So we can move on.
Cool. So my number 4 is, now this top 4 moved around a bit. Like, this one was a little higher until, of course, I gave a few more listens, and I had a kind of thing where this time I think I subconsciously tried to do a little bit of what you do and be a little bit more as objective as you are subjective. I'm more of a gut feeling kind of guy when it comes to my rankings. But my number 4 is Steady Diet and Nothing.
Yeah.
And this feels like the dark horse of their albums, because it's perhaps not their most recognized album, but it's damn good. And that's why I felt as though it needs that middle point. It's that one where I think it's really good, but it has a thing and it does its thing. But again, this is Fugazi, so said thing is still really cool and out there. So Exit Only opens like a swarm of bees before going into this tasty plodding riff. Reclamation, love that bass underneath the strumming. Like, yeah, man.
The thing that Reclamation's probably my favorite Fugazi song, but a thing to point out is that as a young person, as a teenager, when I first got into them, and also I started playing guitar around 94. And I learned to play guitar playing Nirvana riffs and other things like that. But getting into Fugazi, all of a sudden I was like hearing guitar used in a very different way a lot of times, using noise in a very different way. And the thing that I love about a song like Reclamation is that learning to play it on guitar, simple as fuck. It's literally just the octave. But underneath that, you got that. It's that fucking killer fucking bass line under that. And just like they would do those things in a whole lot of songs where a guitar part, I would learn the guitar part. And then, of course, later on, whatever technique they were doing or whatever like combination of notes, I would take things and then I would turn them into my songs. Because in the early 2000s, that's all I wanted. I wanted to find people because there was no metal scene. I had given up on that idea. But I was like, well, if I could find people that want to be in Fugazi, which I never really could. There was always like maybe one person in the band that I was in that kind of we connected on, but it never made it that way. But I always looked at guys like Fugazi. I'm like, how do these four guys find each other? Because I want to find people where if I come up with a riff where I go, your idea is, it's like, where's that come from? It's fucking genius. Anyway. Yeah,
that's something I try and apply to my songwriting. We're working on some stuff, but because we're a 3-piece, Sage, by the way,
Sage.
That's the band I'm in. We're a pretty big deal. We try to do the most with a 3-piece band that we can. We have myself on drums, backing vocals if there's a mic there. We have a bass player, and we have a front man who plays guitar and sings, rhythm and lead. So we're always trying to think, this guitar is playing one thing, so the bass guitar is going to play something completely different, and they'll complement each other. That's a big thing I think some bands forget. Some bands will just be like, here's the riff, bass does that an octave lower. Whereas, sometimes it's so cool to have something like Reclamation where the guitar is doing something simple but texture building, and the bass is just doing some filth,
Well, also nice. The thing that you have to like for songwriters out there, when you add that variety where there's a I don't know, a different color being used with, if you have two guitars, the two guitars are playing something different. If there's a bass, the bass is doing something a little different, but they all go together, in the same key and with similar notes. But when you do that kind of stuff, then you have another secret weapon, which is where occasionally, if you do all lock in together playing the same thing, it's fucking massive. So it's like, it's almost like you're doing yourself a disservice by always locking in, because it's like, well, then you have nowhere to go. And it's like, but if you're expanding things, then when things come together, it just sounds so fucking great. And Fugazi had times where they did that too, where things would just come right together. And anyway,
it's true though. There is that thing of you get that build, that dynamic anticipation where you've got like, oh, they're both doing something different. Boom, everybody's locked in. And it just sounds, you think, oh, where did that come from? Love it. But yeah, so nice new outfit, has a great feel to it. Sparxx, loving the layered guitars in this. They really began to expand the layering on this album. Latin roots, great use.
I just love that.
Use
the other guitar's doing, but the other guitar does that little stop. It's fucking great. Anyway,
it's yeah, like
I love the. That's another thing. Fugazi was really big. They're not the only band, but like I guess Helmet would be one early on for me, where the idea of empty space, I was
yeah.
like, oh, it just adds so much to the. I once saw a quote from the bass player of Radiohead, who's also a really great bass player, and
Mm.
he said I believe this was his quote, and he said, to me, being a good bass player is knowing when not to play. And I'm like,
Yes.
yeah. And I don't think that just stops at bass. I think that stops everywhere. Sometimes you got to know when to not do anything and when to come in. So very
Hell
excited
yeah,
about
man.
talking about this band, by the way, just
Yeah.
so you know, if nobody
Yeah.
could tell.
I'd never have guessed. But yeah, like I say, Latin Roots, just a great use of the stereo field. A
Yeah.
lot of really cool panning going on. Super cool. Steady Diet is, kind of a half title track. Is
Yeah.
this gnarly driving weirdness. Long Division, laid back, short and sweet track. Runaway Return sounds like Helmet if they went down more of a rock route than their metallic kind of sound.
Yeah.
That's something that popped up a lot. I mean, you could argue that Helmet has a lot of qualities of post-hardcore going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they got more metallic as they went on, but like early on, like they're absolutely part of that family of bands.
Yeah. You get Polish, really cool song. Vibes are off the chart, rocking. Dear Justice Letter, like I say, that like this album shows off that further maturity of their sound from their first two albums.
Yeah.
Definitely developing their own sound, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Kyo, is it?
It's
Kyo?
KYEO. It stands for Keep Your Eyes Open.
Ah, sorry.
Because he says that in
Keep
the
your eyes
song,
open.
keep your eyes open.
That's the one. Sorry,
Yeah.
I flubbed that. But
Great closer to that album.
great closer. But yeah, like I say, it's the dark horse of their discography. It's a sleeper hit. You're going to be satisfied if you listen to it, but it's unlikely to appear in a list at the top, you know?
Yeah. So this is also my number 4. So it's interesting how, like, I've known them for so many years. You're just getting in, and we're so locked in on a lot of things. But
Yeah.
I have to admit though that this is probably my number 2 go-to Fugazi album. But in me trying to like think about the albums as a whole and do that thing like you said, where I'm half subjective, half objective,
Yeah.
this ended up at number 4 because I think this is great, and it's to me their most underrated album. I think it does. The people that love it give it a lot of love, but I think it is one of those ones that fans that aren't like crazy about them, this isn't one that a lot of people talk about. But like I said, Reclamation, one of my favorite Fugazi songs. I also love Latin Roots. But yeah, I mean, like a lot of their albums, it's not going to connect with everyone. But there's something about this album there where the energy almost feels kind of forward thinking. And that whole vibe
Yeah.
just makes me really enjoy this album, where it really does feel like a band almost progressing faster than they're expecting to progress. And so it's
Yeah.
it's a really great album. And to me, the one thing about Steady Diet is that, like, a lot of Fugazi stuff, and especially this album, I know it to some people it probably doesn't make any sense, but I hear some albums and I just think to myself, this music sounds important. Like
Yeah.
that's the word that comes up, important. And that's where Steady Diet, lies for me. It is one, I think the band themselves, this is the one that they're the most critical of, and I think it's only because it was the first one I think they produced themselves, and
Yeah,
so
they didn't have
the
a
mix
producer.
didn't. Yeah, it didn't turn out well. They had the engineer that they worked with for almost all their albums, and so they had that guy there to fall back on. But I think this is the first one where they were calling all the shots, and I think in the end they felt like it wasn't as strong as it could be. But I like the sound of this album. But yeah. Like I said, it is probably my second of like my absolute go-to Fugazi albums, but I think overall they did 3 better albums, and so that's we can move on to number three.
Cool. So, I mean, this top three could change any day of the week. Um, but for my number three, I went for Repeater.
Okay.
So, the thing that I really love about this album, much like 13 Songs, which
Mm-hmm.
I haven't talked about yet, but
Nope.
there is a real grungy vibe to these first couple albums, and I fucking love the sonic qualities of that, you know?
Yeah.
I absolutely love that, like, really early, like, well, late 80s, very early 90s grunge style production. Um, and I'm gonna jump into the tracks.
Yeah.
Turnover,
Mm-hmm.
that really fun grungy bass line, cool rocking stuff, which leads directly into Repeater, which
Yeah.
is this noisy ass title track, very upbeat with some very interesting sonic qualities with that lo-fi drum beat. The mixture of clean and distorted guitars is something I absolutely adore,
Yeah. Yeah.
and satisfyingly shouted vocals.
Oh yeah, you
Brendan
can't that you being in a crowd, 1, 2, 3, repeat. Just being in the crowd for that, yeah, it's fucking great.
Hell yeah. Brendan one, like, I'm loving how the bass drives this album.
Oh fuck yeah! If you
Merchandise. Yeah.
going back to fucking Turnover, I'm all like, I don't even remember the guitar parts of that. When I think of Turnover, it's all bass line. It's all boom
Mm.
doo 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 boom boom doo 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 boom doo doo doo. And then when you get to the end, it's that boom doo 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 doo. It's like, it's like it's weird. Like that's the kind of bass player he is. That sometimes you are paying more attention to him than the guitars.
I found myself doing that a lot during this, listening through this whole discography. Um, Merchandise is an absolute tune. Great driving, rocking song. Blueprint is this drony, grungy punkiness. Civ Fisted Find
Mm-hmm.
is an up tempo pounding rocker.
Yeah,
Greed. I like the stops in this song. Like some really
yeah,
cheeky stuff going on musically. They're very,
yeah,
very tight, very locked in, know exactly what they're doing, but it always feels like, what's happening? What's gonna happen next?
yeah, yeah,
Uh, Two beats off, great groove. Styrofoam has this bouncy bass and vibey guitars and shouty vocals again, really cool.
yeah.
Reprovisional, cool instrumental layers going on here. Shut the Door is this slow, grooving, vibed out closing track. This is a fucking great
So you
album.
you listen to it as that's the last track
Oh, well, here's the thing, right? I know that there is Repeater plus three
plus three
songs.
songs. Yeah,
And I thought plus three songs was like a reissue.
it is.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I
So it's
decided
only
because,
because I was going to make the point when I do talk about Repeater that Shut the Door is such a great closer, and the three songs that they tacked on that a lot of people know that's the album. Those songs to me sound like older Fugazi. They don't fit
mm,
on that album. So
yeah.
I like the vinyl version I have, it ends with Shut the Door, and that's just the way that album closes. It's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I went for the original track list because
Yeah.
I knew I didn't want us to be comparing a different version. So I was
Yeah.
like, I know that he's going to go for the original.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm playing along. But yeah, Repeater, my number three. I will say as well, uh, one quick thing, artwork wise, I absolutely love that, like, early 90s font, like just that really big bold, but it's very distinctive. It's got
Mm-hmm.
that, it's got, I don't know what font it is, but it's one of those, it's kind of like a skinnier version of the Faith No More real thing, introduce yourself thing. And I
Uh-huh.
just always love that sort of, that bold thing. it's kind of ambiguous stylistically. You could tack it on something very punky or something heavy. There's just something about that era that I really enjoy. It's just
Yeah.
the imagery of that time. But yeah,
Sweet.
that's number three for me.
Well,
Repeater.
this is where we diverge, and because my number three is Red Medicine from 1995.
Ah.
Um, so coming from In on the Kill Taker, Red Medicine is more experimental, but I think because it's followed by End Hits, which is very experimental, Red Medicine is like kind of come back to me as like, oh well, this is it's just a little bit experimental. And production wise and everything, it feels like it's a little less urgent, but I think in its own way, it has its own potency to it the more that you listen to it. Red Medicine was a really big deal because when I got really into Fugazi, Red Medicine was currently the new album. In Hits hadn't come out yet, and listening to it, like I was talking about earlier about hearing guitar work and stuff, Red Medicine like really opened my mind as a musician and a songwriter just because of the different things that they were doing on that album. And I started my first band around this time in 1995 and couldn't write anything anywhere near what they were doing. But I always kind of brought with me a thing where when I would write things, I would try to come up with odd ways to do things, which, now looking back on it, none of it was odd at all. But to me, it was I was trying to channel the unusual aspects of Red Medicine in stuff that I wrote. It was just, by a fucking amateur novice, but there's so many great songs on here. Birthday Pony and Target are probably two of my favorites. The riff in Target. There's a weird thing with, I don't know if, I guess the riff isn't necessarily this, but for some reason, I like riffs that feel kind of circular. I don't know why they're very pleasing to me. Because the riff to that song is that ding 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 dong ding 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 dong ding 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 dong ding 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 dong, and it's got a very feels very circular to me, and I've always really liked that, and I don't know why, but there are a lot of heavy riffs that begin and end on the same note. That one doesn't, but things like that, for some reason I go, oh, it's so great, and I don't know why. I don't know why that the connection does something for me. But I have to say that musically speaking, especially now talking about this album 25 years later plus, in 1995, alternative music wasn't alternative anymore. It was mainstream music, and a lot of it was being very, I don't know, commercialized isn't really the right word, because I have no problem with music reaching a broad audience, but I feel like bands that were alternative bands were making music that was more straightforward, whereas Red Medicine to me feels like an actual alternative album. That came out in 1995. So if not the genre alternative, but the idea of it being rock music that is an alternative to what is going on. And I love that about Red Medicine, legit alternative music. And probably my favorite moment of this album is the song By You, because it's one of the only 2 or 3 times where Joe Lally is the lead vocalist. And I even wrote a note like I thought you would write. And so I wrote By You, a noisy groover. And that's what I love about By You, is that to me, it feels like nothing they had done, because it's layered and it's big and it's groovy and it's just got this vibe. And then you have Joe Lally's vocals, which is more understated in the song. And that is just one that has grown so much over the years, as one that I just fucking love. Anyway, yeah, my number 3, Red Medicine.
Awesome sauce. So excuse me, my throat decided to abort mission there for a second. Uh, so my number two is In on the Kill Taker.
All right, cool.
Uh, this album feels like they're at the point where they're like, oh, so this is what we can sound like? Cool. Like
Yeah,
their creativity, I would say this is from a strength and creativity perspective, both are on high throughout.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it is, to quote you, unfuckwithable.
Oh,
There is
yeah,
just
yeah.
there is there's just a level of quality on this one. Like I was taken aback by like how many things caught me off guard. And this is 4 albums in.
Yeah. Oh, did you
And
did you listen to them in order when you did it?
I did. I did
Nice.
listen
Okay.
to them chronologically because sorry, with a band like this, I just felt like the right way to do it
Yeah.
because you get this rapid evolution from like grungy punk, experimental grungy punk, layered punk and alt stuff, and then you get this, which is just like, let's take everything we have and make it all killer. So you get Facet Squared. The layered complexity of their songwriting right out of the gate is just boom.
Yeah.
Like, and I can understand how, like, at the time, what year would it have been when you heard this album? Like
96.
96. At the time, like hearing this was, I can imagine being like, okay, I've
Yeah.
never heard that,
Yeah.
Public Witness program is very punky, very
Oh man.
short,
Yeah.
very fun. Returning the Screw is this slow boiling track, really cool vibe going on there.
Yep.
Smallpox Champion, it's just this yelly, heavy rocking song.
hmm
Rend It, Left Turn much? There's
that one
yeah,
has that moment. I don't know how to put it. It's because it fakes you out because it comes in with that
yeah,
and then it stops and it does that, why don't you come to my house, like that part. I'm just like,
yeah.
oh, it's so fucking good. And then he does the entire first like few lines with no music underneath him at all, and then it comes in real gentle, and I'm just like,
Yeah,
it's fucking great.
yeah. That was like one of those moments where I was like, ready to. Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
what's this? 23 beats off.
Mhm.
Feels like one of the weirder Nirvana tracks. Like that. That's the kind of vibe I got off that song.
Sure.
Sweet and low. Their bass lines are always top tier. Very
Mhm.
melodic stuff. Casavete, is that the one? Yeah. I,
Cassavetes.
Yeah, that's the one. All I've got for this note is just shut up.
Oh
Yeah.
God. And once
Yeah.
again, the guitars are just doing
Mm.
and it sounds
Yeah.
so fucking cool. But it doesn't take
Yeah.
any, like your fucking guitar snob would be like, it's not hard to play that. I'm like, they're not doing it because it's hard. It
It
sounds
doesn't
fucking
have to be.
awesome.
Yeah. It's like one of those things that's like so simple but always satisfying. It's like, for me, super easy way to get me on your side is just do a dive bomb. Just do a dive bomb on a
Yeah.
Floyd Rose. Woo! You son of a bitch, I'm in. Uh, Great Cop is another short, punky
Oh shit,
one.
yeah.
Walking Syndrome starts with this is one of those moments where I was like, I had to like really squint my ears to, I guess you'd say, because the song starts with guitar noises
Mhm.
that sound like noises Mike Patton can do with his voice. And I
Yeah.
was like, is it wait, is that a voice or is it a guitar? So like, look, the noise stuff that they bring in as well, it's like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of this stuff, like especially like when you get into like noise territory with like guitars and stuff, super hard to do that shit twice. like,
Yeah.
because it just kind of happens, um Last Chance for a Slow Dance, awesome closer.
Yeah.
Like I say, this to me is where I think their creativity and vision kind of peaked.
Hmm.
um because like the albums after it, they are more experimental but feel a little less cohesive. So
Yeah. I almost feel like
that's
their trajectory is like they start and then they're going up and up and up. And then after and on the Kilt Taker, they go out. It's like
yes.
it's kind of like that's where that's kind of how that
Yeah,
I mean, it just feels like that for me.
that's a really good way to put it. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I mean, and that is not my number two. So my number two is Repeater, or in your country, Repeater.
Repeater.
Um, from
Well,
1990.
check out this album, Repeater.
I poll. Okay.
Ringo gave me this album.
So Repeater is the first actual full length Fugazi album. And I'm the three songs was added later, which three songs are fine. They just don't belong on this album for me. Um, honestly, it feels like the first proper Fugazi album because
Mm.
so like the beginning of Fugazi, if you listen to the first half of 13 songs, the first EP, Guy Picciotto doesn't play guitar.
Mm.
He was initially brought in to almost be like a like a Flavor Flav, which is why, like,
Yeah,
and like,
boy.
which is like in Waiting Room, he does like, come on and get up, like he does that kind of stuff in it. Like he was almost the guy that was there because he's fucking his energy is fucking insane on stage.
Yeah.
And so he was the guy that was there, and he sang a couple songs, and then he didn't play guitar. And I'm not sure if he played guitar on Margin Walker, but finally with Repeater, they're a 4-piece band with 2 guitar players, and all of them coming in with songwriting as opposed to just Ian kind of driving what's going on. So Repeater to me feels like the first legit Fugazi album, and it's an absolute classic. This is one of those that I remember probably the first time I ever heard the name Fugazi was once in like 91, 92. All of a sudden alternative bands started coming on MTV because I didn't know who the fuck Fugazi were because I was young and I was like an MTV kid. I didn't know underground shit. But as soon as bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and all these other bands became popular, you would randomly hear the name Fugazi said. And I feel like Repeater was the album that a lot of them were like really crazy about. And I absolutely get it. I would call this the best entry point. So those of you out there, if you've made it this long into this episode and you don't really know Fugazi, I'd say Repeater is a nice way to start.
Yeah.
It's got so many classic songs: Blueprint, Merchandise, Styrofoam. Those also sound like very 90s song titles, so I love that.
Yeah.
But musically, it's also another very influential album for me. The three albums, Repeater, and the Kill Taker, Red Medicine, those are 3 super important albums for me as a musician and a songwriter. But I really think that Repeater, when it comes to the early stages of that driven Fugazi sound, like they're just letting this machine take them, and what they've stumbled upon. And I think Repeater is the best example of that. And for when it comes to Shut the Door, if you ever get a chance, I don't know where you can find it over in your country, but the documentary Instrument is really cool because it's not like a normal documentary where the band sit down and somebody sits down and says, here's the history of the band, let's talk about the band. It's not like that at all. It almost gives you a retrospective kind of thing without actually having any talking heads whatsoever. Some of it is just like indie television interviews, live performances. There's studio footage, especially from Red Medicine and In Hits and stuff. But it begins with them doing a live performance at a show of Shut the Door, and you watch those guys play together and them vibing off of each other. There's a really great moment where the song is done like verse, chorus, whatever, and then it just goes into a a quiet part where it's just the drums and the bass doing the do 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 that part, and Ian Mackay and Guy Picciotto, without even looking at each other, both start doing the same movement at the same time, and they kind of glance at each other, and they do these random hits where there's nothing happening, and they all go, and it gets quiet again. But the fact that they're so on with exactly when this is going to happen, and I don't know, maybe they had it planned out, but the way that it feels, it's like they're just looking at each other, and in their brains are going to each other. 3, 2, and like, you know, like, and it's just like one of those performances where I just like, the song goes up way up a few levels for me seeing that, because just watching these guys, like one of the best bands ever, and just in the fucking pocket, and I'm just, you know, it's baffling to me. And it's all that was like the gold standard of like, if I could ever be in a band that worked that well, I don't care. Any level of success is fine. If I could feel that feeling, which I never did, never was in a band that felt like that. But if I could get that feeling, that would be insane. But yeah, anyway, that's a great song, great ending to the album. I really feel like the 3 songs part, it feels like music they had already matured way past. And so it ends on like, well, these are cool songs, but Shut the Door is so great that's kind of where you should shut the door on the album right there. Boom. That's my number 2, Repeater.
Nice. Which leaves me with my number 1, which is 13 songs.
Yep.
And, you know, like I said, these top 3 or 4 jump around a lot, but I went with my gut instinct, and my ears just love that late 80s, early 90s production vibe.
Yeah.
And, you know, pair that with the songwriting on this, and you get a really cool borderline grunge punk album. And it's like, I fucking love how it sounds from start to finish.
Yeah.
Waiting Room goes without saying. I mean, it's a classic.
That is most people know that one, but that's also a song that, you know, if in the circles that I ran in, if you were at a bar and somebody put on Waiting Room, the first line, you know, I am a patient boy, the entire bar goes, oh, wait, like everybody. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Bartenders, everybody does that part of the song, and everybody's moving. It's just literally like, stop what you're doing, Waiting Room's on, everybody is going to sing this part of the song. And that was always just cool to me, because I'm just like, oh, I love it. I love feeling like everybody knows that this is cool shit too.
Yeah. It's one of those like albums where I just think every song had a moment for me, like, you know, Bulldog Front.
Yeah.
Shouty vocals are fun, aren't they? Like,
yeah.
Bad Mouth. The chord sequences here feel, I mean, obviously they were a very innovative band, but like the chord sequences feel very ahead of their time for 1989. Like,
oh yeah,
Bad Mouth feels like a song that could come out in 96 and be huge. Burning, dude, this is one of those times where I'm writing this, I'm sat thinking to myself, dude, where has this been? Like,
yeah,
or like rather, where have I been? Going.
Yeah,
yeah.
No, it's like rad. there's no wrong time to get into something like Fugazi. It just happens. However your life has turned out, you know, you get turned on to shit at some point. So that makes me happy that you just enjoyed it this much.
Yeah, man. Like, Give Me the Cure. Love that
song.
Love the explosive ending to that one. Suggestion, super cool laid back riffage.
Yeah.
Glue Man, wild chugging.
So Glue Man is the beginning of Margin Walker. Never mind. Glue Man is the end of the first EP, and the next one is the start of Margin Walker. Because I always really loved because Glue Man is like real chaotic sounding song, but I always just loved the really abrupt ending to Suggestion, because the song is all about like men objectifying women and about how
Mm.
they did not they don't they he even says it in the song, did nothing to deserve it, where it's just like she's just walking down the street, but she has to fucking worry about men. Um,
Yeah.
and then the way the song plays out, he does that line where he goes, "We blame her for being there," and then you hear him quietly go, "But we're all here, and we're all guilty," and then and it stops like really abruptly, and that's
Yeah.
like the way that they stop it, almost like it's a mistake that it was that abrupt. But I'm always just like, I'm sorry if I blew out anybody's ears. But I absolutely love that part of just that ending to the song, because I'm just like, it seems so much more meaningful that it just gets abruptly cut off right there. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really cool, dude. Uh, Margin Walker, more cool stuff. Like, again, like I say, and the same has a groovy bass line. Burning 2, spelled with, two O's.
which that's a
Yeah,
nice groover, that song.
yeah. And like I say, there's parts of this that sound Helmet-esque, to my virgin Fugazi ears.
Yeah.
Me likey. Provisional is very alt rock. Lockdown feels like it's going to come off the rails at any minute in a good way.
Yeah.
And Promises is this jammy, cool closing track. Love the grungy vibe of this album. Like I say, had this come from Seattle, it would be a grunge classic. I just, there's a punk deep dive for me that's long overdue. And I feel
Yeah.
like this is the catalyst for me doing that, because there's so much cool, weird, but in a cool way, stuff in
I
this
mean,
discography alone.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's happened in various times and in various, countries as well, because like Fugazi, what they were doing was, different, but there was also elements of what they were doing that had been done 10 years prior with Gang of Four in
Yep.
England. So if you go back and listen to some Gang of Four, that shit sounds like revolutionary in what they were doing. But then
Mm.
there were other bands in the 80s. Mission of Burma is a really good example, where Mission of Burma is a band that were doing shit. I don't even think that they knew that it was mind blowing, because they had a thing where they fucked around with like noise tape loops in their songs, and it'd be just weird random noises and shit in their music that, like, I don't think anybody had done that shit before.
Mm.
So it's just like one of those things where I almost feel like Fugazi is the band that, because they're pretty well known, but I feel like that's a really good step. And then you just kind of follow, like, well, who were the bands that they were influenced by or whatever, and it kind of leads you down this path of all this music that, sure, it falls under like maybe the punk umbrella, but to me it's way more interesting than the Ramones or anything like that, which I love the Ramones, but you know what I'm saying? It's like it's all post-punk, post-hardcore. If you put the word post before it, most of the time I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this should be interesting.
Yeah. Cool. So that leaves your number one.
All right, get ready, everybody. I'm probably gonna lose my shit here talking about this album.
No
Number one
idea what
Fugazi
this is going
album,
to be.
In on the Kill Taker from 1993. So, like I said, teenager in the back room at Best Buy, I put this tape in and I hear Facet Squared, and it's literally it has just as much importance to me as when I heard Smells Like Teen Spirit. Like,
Wow.
Not as anthemic. Well, I guess it is. Facet Squared is pretty anthemic, but just hearing Nirvana for the first time as a person that wanted to play music, they kind of led me in this way of like, oh, so I love all of this big grand metal music with these virtuosos, but I don't have to do that. And there's these people that are doing this other stuff. And it led me down that path. But then hearing Facet Squared, that was almost like another awakening of like just how potent and powerful, and just the fucking riff at the beginning, where, because it starts off with like a cool bass line, just kind of like the little feedback being turned on and off. But then once that once that riff kicks in,
Yeah.
It gives me chills every fucking time I hear it. It gives me a rush of adrenaline. And honestly, the rush of adrenaline I feel when that song starts, it does not end until the album ends for me. So totally was a life changer for me, musically speaking. It's easily the most aggressive Fugazi album. So I almost feel like, if you're a metalhead, maybe start with In on the Kill Taker, because it's the most aggressive that they did. But doesn't mean you're probably, you probably already turned this off if you're not open to this kind of stuff. But this is really
all that punk shit sucks. Belongs on fucking Mars, man.
And Madonna can go to hell as far as I'm concerned. She's a dick.
She's a dick.
But yeah, this album is just banger after banger. One of the best albums ever made, in my opinion. And on top of that, the reason why I love this is because it's got things that are Fugazi, like Fugazi would do. But I feel like some of the songs are some of the most powerful songs they ever wrote. Returning the Screw, Rend It, 23 Beats Off, Great Cop. These are all songs that, like, lyrically speaking, and just the overall sound of them, especially like 23 Beats Off, that is a fucking heartbreaking song, because it's literally all about somebody dying of AIDS and then their life just equating to a statistic. And then the way that the song ends with almost like 2 or 3 minutes of just fucking feedback is like, and I'm just like, it's almost like the flatline kind of sound at the end of it. And I'm just like, it's so fucking powerful. And then of course, Great Cop is like, that's another like adrenaline rush for me, just because it's one of those things that always baffles me, that, and I know that like it's different for everyone has their different experiences, but I grew up and have lived almost 45 years, and most of my experience with police officers is bad. They were mostly bad people and not there to protect and serve. They're there to be an authority figure and to enjoy having power and
protect the interests of capital and whatnot,
or whatever. It's just, but Great Cop, I love it because it's such a good release of that anger, but it's not very long and the lyrics aren't very complicated. But and honestly, like the way that it's worded, it's not, it could, you could interpret it as a cop, but it's not really about a cop, because the chorus is, it's, you'd make a great cop. And it's like, well, so it's like a person like that, that's just in somebody's face trying to dictate what they do, or,
respect my authority.
yeah. And so I just love that. I love that. And then, I don't know, there's the songs that are just full on jams, like Public Witness Program and Smallpox Champion. Like this is like a top 10 of all time album for me. Which is interesting, because I've done things about my top 10 favorite albums and I didn't talk about this album. And it's only because when I first started doing my podcast and my channel, I felt nervous, because at first I'm like, I'm just going to stick to hard rock and heavy metal, because the last thing I wanted was like shit talking from people, which I ended up getting it anyway. But I honed everything I was doing in on just straightforward hard rock metal, things that fall into that. And then Fugazi doesn't fall into that, although a lot of things that they do you could equate to hard rock music. But I would say like it's long overdue for me to do like a legit top 10 albums where I actually include things that aren't necessarily rock and metal, because there are other kinds of music and things that I love, that and On the Kill Taker is a top 10 desert island album. It's fucking perfect, and I love the way that it sounds. It's interesting because they recorded the album twice. because they recorded it first with Steve Albini, who did In Utero and other albums, and they didn't like how it sounded, so they recorded it again with a guy that they had already been working with. And I'm just like, you can hear, I think you can hear that version if you just look it up on the internet. It's out there to listen to.
Cool.
To me, it doesn't sound as good, but sometimes I listen to like little bits of that and I go, would it have had the same effect on me, that version of it, as this one did? Luckily I don't have to worry about that, because this is the version that we have. And
come to think of like different versions of stuff, like very recently, just to, while it's on my mind, I managed to score an original. Is it still in the stack, or have I moved it? I think I've moved it, but I managed to, at a small rock festival I played. I say small. It was pretty fun. Drunken Monkey Festival in Worcester. It's really fun. Real fun real honor for our second gig to be at a festival.
Yeah.
But there was a record stall, and I managed to get a CD of Cryptic Writings by Megadeth, the original version.
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, I can't not leave with that. Not when it's only £3. So I've been listening, because I'll be honest, I heard the remasters first.
Yeah.
And it never bothered me before, but now I've been going back and revisiting the original versions.
Yeah.
It's fucking night and day. Like, it's fun having the spines of the CDs come together to make one big Vic Rattlehead face.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I'm not going to lie. The original mix of Cryptic Writings is some cool shit. Like, there's so much going on that's not there in the remaster.
The original, I love the original mix of Risk. That's one of the only, I don't have very many CDs, but I have Risk, because I'm just like, this is fucking great. And then they ruined it. And that one and Rust in Peace are the two that I'm just like, why did they do this? Why did they murder these albums? But even then, even Countdown to Extinction and Cryptic Writings, the drum production on it sounds awful. Like, they fucking ruined how the drums sounded. I say it's Dave Mustaine. Anyway, I love how, like, Fugazi,
leave the album alone.
We got onto that was like a Phil Anselmo. I
don't know what happened. It's just like I used to do a really good Dave and a really good Phil, and now they've become one person.
There's Phil Mustaine. Is this? That sounds gross.
Phil Mustaine.
It's funny that we ended up there from Fugazi, but that I was done, and we talked about my number one, so we're done with Fugazi. Oh shit, which we haven't done a discography in a little bit, so we haven't done this in a while. So let's do it. 3, 2, 1. Yeah,
we did it. There it is.
Yeah, we did it. Fugazi.
We did it.
I'm very happy that we did this. This was fun. Because honestly, like, there's a lot, like I said, like, it wouldn't surprise me if this video doesn't get a lot of views, because there's those bands out there that it seems like tons of people want to talk about, and I'm perfectly happy. I'll talk all day about Metallica, even though millions of people do. But Fugazi is a band that, like, I see less about them on the internet.
Yeah, this is where, like, this one gets like 3 million views or some shit.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Maybe one of those
top 10 anime plot twists.
Maybe one of those would be Ian MacKaye, and he can maybe I can interview him at some point. I'd be really nervous about that, because Ian MacKaye seems like a nice dude, but he does have qualities that make me feel like I feel about Mike Patton, where I feel like I might be too dumb to interview him.
There's what's that Chris Farley sketch where
he does Paul McCartney?
Yeah. Remember when you were in the Beatles? That was awesome.
Yeah, that would literally be me with Ian MacKaye. It'd be like, so You were in Fugazi, right? It's cool. So I wouldn't do that. Although, like I hear people that, when you go through DC, like you can actually go to, like, there's a really famous house that Ian, I think, still lives in, or maybe he just runs. I don't know if he runs Discord out of it. I don't know how it works, but it's a house that, like, you have you seen those pictures of Minor Threat sitting on the stairs, and then people recreate those with different things. That house is a house you can still go visit.
Holy shit!
But you obviously have to know Ian or contact Ian and ask to come, and he'll give you a tour, and he'll apparently,
we're not mental or anything.
Yeah, but apparently he'll make you tea and, like, come give you a tour. I would even be nervous about that.
What a cool guy. That's really cool, though.
Yeah. He seems cool, but he really does, like, seem like a person that's kind of beyond me, where I would feel
beyond
like
our mortal minds.
I would just feel very small and insignificant, which is weird because, like, on a similar note, they're related because they have been best friends for many years, but Henry Rollins is a person that I greatly respect and admire, but he gives me the vibe that I would feel way more comfortable just walking up to him and be like, Henry, and, like, just having a chat with him, even though he is also a very smart dude. But it's just that thing about certain heroes of mine. Some of them really give off the vibe of, like, come chat with me, and then other ones, you could literally get them on a day where they're just like, what the fuck do you want? And that would just that would ruin me for the rest of my life. So I probably wouldn't do it. Anyway, Fugazi.
Fugazi,
which apparently, which apparently, like, that's a military or something from the military that actually is kind of a weird acronym. And I think it's like fucked up, got ambushed, zipped in, which means, like, zipped into a body bag. So it's like what Fugazi. But I think the word Fugazi, because I think it comes from a book that somebody wrote, and they made up the term Fugazi, but then I think it's now been used just to mean a situation that's gotten out of hand and fucked up. I mean,
like
unexpectedly.
Situation snafu. Normal, all fucked up.
Or Fubar is another one.
Yeah.
Fucked up beyond all recognition. Anyway.
So many good ones, man.
That was fun. That's all. I don't have anything else. We talked a lot. I'm going hoarse because I got so excited talking so much about Fugazi.
Hey, peanut butter platypuses and whatnot.
Peanut butter platypuses. That in this case, you are the major peanut butter platypuses. I salute you all. But next time you see us, we'll be back with another ranking, right? Yes. Next time you see us, it'll be another band ranking.
I did the salute wrong. Hold on.
Oh, is that what it is?
Well, the British salute is different to the American salute.
I kind of like that better.
Yeah, ours is up and around and then zip down to the right, whereas I think the American one is, and then I don't know. Mine was vaguely third Reich at the end there. I really fucked that one up.
I used to do this a lot to people, like, back in the day, and it's only because there's a scene in Clerks where Randall has annoyed this customer to the point where he's trying to fight him, and he was like, I'm never coming into your gear again. I'm gonna break your fucking face. And then Randall just goes, I was just like, that's pretty sweet. For those of you listening at home, it's like a salute with two fingers and a peace sign kind of thing. I've always just said I always really like that. Anyway, okay.
Nice.
We have to wrap this up at some point. Thank you very much for joining us for Cranked and Ranked. We'll see you all again soon. And as usual, I'm going to throw it over to my other half, my better half in the Cranked and Wanked.
That's the best one I think I've ever seen.
And just like,
get back on the road.
That was brilliant.
Land the plane.
It made sense because I called you my better half and then Cranked and Wanked because, there'd probably be a lot of wanking going on in that marriage. Anyway, yes. the other half, the yin to my yang. Mr. Eddie Sparxx to take us out.
Later, dude!